An actual infinity cannot exist in any possible real world. This points to the existence of God as ultimate first cause that created all of physical reality. Infinity is a concept that has long fascinated mathematicians, philosophers, and theologians alike. While it plays a crucial role in mathematical theories and abstract reasoning, the idea of an actual infinity, something infinite in quantity or extent, poses significant challenges when applied to the real world. This video explores why an actual infinity cannot exist, not only in our own physical reality but in any possible real world. The impossibility of actual infinity in the context of reality points to deep philosophical truths about the nature of existence, causality, and the limits of what can be. Understanding actual infinity. Before discussing why an actual infinity cannot exist in any possible real world, it's essential to clarify what is meant by actual infinity versus potential infinity. Actual infinity. This refers to a completed, fully realized infinite quantity or set. An actual infinity implies an infinite number of elements or an infinite extent that exists simultaneously and is fully formed. Potential infinity. This is an ongoing process that can continue indefinitely but is never completed. For example, counting numbers can go on forever, but at any given point, only a finite number have been counted. The process can extend infinitely in theory, but it is never fully realized as an actual infinity. While potential infinity is a useful concept in mathematics and theoretical models, the notion of an actual infinity presents profound logical and philosophical difficulties, making it impossible for such a concept to exist in any real world. The logical paradoxes of actual infinity. 1. The paradoxes of infinity. The concept of actual infinity gives rise to numerous paradoxes that reveal its incompatibility with reality. One well-known paradox is Hilbert's hotel, a thought experiment proposed by mathematician David Hilbert. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, all of which are occupied. If a new guest arrives, the hotel manager can still accommodate them by shifting each guest from room N to room N+1, thereby freeing up room 1. Despite being fully occupied, the hotel can always accommodate more guests, leading to paradoxical and counterintuitive outcomes. In any conceivable real world, such a paradox would be impossible. The notion that an already full, infinite set can still accept more elements contradicts the basic principles of logic and the finite nature of reality. These paradoxes illustrate that actual infinity is not just difficult to comprehend, it is logically inconsistent when applied to real-world scenarios. 2. Zeno's paradoxes. Zeno's paradoxes, particularly the dichotomy paradox, further illustrate the impossibility of actual infinity in reality. Zeno argued that to reach any destination, one must first travel half the distance, then half of the remaining distance, and so on ad infinitum. If this process were taken to be an actual infinity, one would never reach the destination because there would always be an infinite number of steps left to complete. In any possible real world, movement and causality require that processes be finite and completed. The fact that we do reach destinations in the real world demonstrates that an infinite series of tasks cannot be completed in reality. This implies that actual infinity, whether in space, time, or division, cannot exist in any real-world scenario. The philosophical argument against actual infinity in reality. 1. The principle of sufficient reason. The principle of sufficient reason, PSR, states that everything must have a reason or cause for its existence. When applied to the concept of an actual infinity, the PSR leads to insurmountable difficulties. An actual infinity, by its very nature, cannot have a sufficient cause or explanation. If we imagine an infinite regress of causes, where each cause is explained by a prior cause, we end up with no ultimate explanation for the existence of the sequence itself. This lack of a sufficient reason or first cause means that an actual infinity is incompatible with the PSR. In any possible real world, the existence of things must be grounded in a reason or cause. An infinite series of contingent events without a starting point would violate this principle, making actual infinity impossible in any reality where the PSR holds true. 2. The problem of infinite regress. In the context of causality, an infinite regress suggests an endless chain of causes with no beginning. If an actual infinity of causes were possible, there would be no first cause, no explanation for why anything exists at all. This leads to a fundamental incoherence, as an infinite regress cannot be traversed or completed. In any possible real world, the notion of causality demands that there be a first cause, a foundation for the existence of everything else. The impossibility of traversing an infinite regress implies that actual infinity cannot exist in the context of causality. Every possible world that adheres to the principles of causality and reason must have a finite, terminable sequence of causes, thereby ruling out the existence of an actual infinity. The physical impossibility of actual infinity in any world. 1. The constraints of physics. In our world, the laws of physics impose strict constraints on the nature of reality. Space, time, energy, and matter are finite, and the universe itself is governed by laws that preclude the existence of actual infinity. Concepts such as the speed of light, the finite age of the universe, and the quantization of energy all indicate that infinity cannot be a feature of the physical world. Even if we imagine a different possible world with different physical laws, the problem of actual infinity persists. Any coherent set of physical laws would need to account for the nature of space, time, and causality in a consistent manner. The introduction of actual infinity into these systems would lead to contradictions and paradoxes, making it impossible for such a world to exist coherently. 2. The finite nature of space and time. In any conceivable real world, space and time must be finite or quantized to avoid paradoxes associated with actual infinity. For example, if time were infinite, then an infinite amount of time would have had to pass before any present moment, which is impossible because an infinite sequence cannot be completed. Similarly, if space were infinite in extent, we would face logical and physical contradictions. Infinite space would imply an infinite number of locations, leading to paradoxes like those encountered in Hilbert's hotel. The finite nature of space and time is a necessary condition for the coherence of any possible real world, further ruling out the existence of actual infinity. The theological implications. 1. The concept of God and infinity. In theology, God is often described as infinite in nature, but this infinity is not an actual infinity in the same sense as described in mathematics or physics. God's infinity refers to qualities such as omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence, which transcend the limitations of finite beings. However, this is not the same as an actual infinity of events, moments, or physical quantities. God, as a necessary being, is not subject to the paradoxes and contradictions associated with actual infinity in the physical world. Instead, God's nature is seen as beyond time, space, and causality, making God the foundation for the existence of finite, contingent realities. The impossibility of actual infinity in the physical world highlights the necessity of a transcendent being, God, as the ultimate explanation for existence. 2. The need for a first cause. The impossibility of actual infinity points to the necessity of a first cause, a being or entity that exists without needing to be caused by something else. In any possible real world, the existence of a finite chain of causes necessitates a beginning, and that beginning must be something that is not contingent but necessary. This first cause is God, who exists necessarily and provides the foundation for all contingent realities. The rejection of actual infinity in the context of causality strengthens the argument for the existence of a necessary, uncaused cause, God, as the ultimate explanation for why anything exists at all. Conclusion. The concept of actual infinity is a powerful and useful abstraction in mathematics, but it leads to insurmountable paradoxes and contradictions when applied to the real world. Whether considering logical paradoxes, philosophical principles, or physical constraints, it becomes clear that an actual infinity cannot exist in any possible real world. The impossibility of an actual infinity highlights the need for finite, terminable sequences in causality, space, and time. It also underscores the necessity of a first cause or necessary being, God, who provides the ultimate explanation for the existence of everything else. In conclusion, the idea of actual infinity is incompatible with the nature of any possible real world. It remains a theoretical construct, valuable in abstract reasoning but impossible to realize in reality. This understanding reinforces the limits of what can be and points to deeper truths about the nature of existence, causality, and the necessity of a transcendent cause beyond the finite, contingent world we experience. This points to the existence of God as ultimate first cause that created all of physical reality. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and comment below if you agree, or would like to add your thoughts.